la la la. I forgot to choose filter. Okay, I'm live if you want to join. Filter is too fake.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. We're live. I'm waiting for Roy. View request. Let's see here. Go with it. Are we live? Is it working? There you are.
Hey.
Oh, let's
mute on Instagram. Okay, we didn't think about this.
What? You're muting Zoom as well? You muted your mic.
Mute. We did not think about this.
How are we going to be able to do this?
I can't hear you on Zoom.
Hold on a second. Can you hear? Are you? Oh, I got it. Okay. Now we're good, yeah?
Yeah.
I just have my computer, my phone turned all the way down.
Same.
Hi, you
Hopefully.
guys, you're joining us on Instagram Live. Roy and I are attempting to record on Zoom while also being on Instagram Live, and we did not think about the feedback that was going to happen.
Okay, I'm gonna leave my microphone here so people can hear me on Instagram as well.
Yeah.
And that should work now. Okay.
Is there still an echo on
Not on my side.
Somebody just commented on Instagram there. Oh, they're still saying there's quite an echo. Okay, we did not think about this, you guys.
Well, I thought about it, but I didn't. I thought that if you just turn it down, it should be fine. I don't know.
What is causing the echo? I mean, we're just on Instagram Live. This has never happened before. Sorry if it's like painful to your ears. I don't know. Why would there be an echo? Does anybody have any suggestions why? Well.
Okay.
If they said if one of you wears headphones, it should help. I thought that same thing, and mine just died. Do you have the ability to wear headphones?
Yeah. I will.
The problem, we did mute Instagram. Somebody's saying unmute Instagram. We both turned down Instagram, but if we muted Instagram, you would not be able to hear us on this live. Of course, my headphones died 10 minutes ago.
Okay, so I'm on the headphones now.
Yes.
Is that better?
Yeah. Is that better, you guys? Hey, Instagram, is that better? Hey, Roy, can you talk?
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Hopefully there's still some echo.
Everyone's saying so much better. Yay! We thank you guys for sticking with us. If it gets wonky again, please tell us. Oh, man. Yay, we did it! We only lost a few viewers in that process. Okay, Roy, are you
Hopefully
ready?
they'll come back.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so this is going to be for the Remodeled Love podcast. And so I'm going to go ahead and do that intro. Hey, everybody, you're listening to Remodeled the podcast. I am your polyamorous mama, Jessica-levity day lover, and I am so excited for this conversation today because I have admired this fellow content creator for a while now. And so when he reached out to me and was like, put me on your podcast, I was like, okay. So hi, Roy.
Hi.
Roy of Open Relating. So we start all of our interviews here on Remodeled Love with a privilege and identity check-in, just to normalize those things, but also so that everyone listening, if they don't know who you are, even if they do, they're reminded of the particular lens you are walking this life with.
Okay, well, let's see. I am this man. I am white presenting. And I have a advanced education. I've been to university in the Philippines there, and I speak 3 languages, and I've lived on 4 continents. So I think that will cover it.
They're saying that there's some echo again. I'm gonna see. Okay, you guys, Roy, can you talk?
Okay, is it better now?
I think so. Is it better, you guys, when he talks? Okay, let's keep going and see what happens. Okay, can you give us your identity again?
Okay, I was just thinking that yeah, I don't actually know why the echo would be, so well, hopefully it's okay now. So yeah, I'm Roy. I'm a cis man. I'm white presenting. I have a secondary education, advanced education, and I'm straight. I'm solo polyamorous, and in terms of identity, I think that about covers it. I also speak 3 languages and lived in 4 continents, so I hopefully am much more aware of what my identity means and what my privilege means, just thanks to living and experiencing different cultures.
Amazing. And how long have you been polyamorous?
Now it would be about 11 years.
Okay. Okay. So I want to hear your polyamory origin story. Take us all the way back to your first inklings that your path in this lifetime was a little bit different.
So my path has been different from very early on, but not necessarily in a polyamorous sense. So I'll maybe leave that to another podcast. But I first started on the wrong path, I would say, or on the erroneous path by when I was married. I reached a point with my wife where basically we stopped having sex and had very little interaction and lived kind of separately in the same flat. We were living in China without access to therapy or counseling or anything like that, and quite a lonely existence in that sense, and couldn't really go for help. So we, at some point, decided that the way to resolve that is to open the marriage. And for a while, we did that on a DADT, don't ask, don't tell kind of setup. Now, I don't have to necessarily, I don't think you'll be surprised if I tell you it didn't work. And we ended up separating and divorcing. But at the time, while I think that there was a part of me that saw that as quite a natural thing to do. Like, it wasn't too weird, but it just didn't solve the problem. And later on, in my next relationship, I was still monogamous, and I had no vocabulary or terminology to describe what I really want. However, I was in a long-distance relationship where I was openly saying that I am not willing to be exclusive monogamous as long as it's long distance, because I had certain needs and I wanted to continue exploring. So that was openly said, openly discussed. Again, without necessarily the knowledge of what polyamory is or ethical non-monogamy, etc. The first time I heard about it was later on when I was single and just dating, and met somebody online. That would have been about 11 years ago, where I really liked the person, and she, on the first date, told me that she's non-monogamous and explained how she was married, she got divorced, she doesn't want the monogamy, she doesn't want exclusivity. And that is basically her conditions for dating her. And I really liked her, so I thought, why not? I'll try it, and I will see how it goes, you know. And essentially, it was just to be able to date her.
Yeah, totally.
And but you know, logically, it did make sense. Like when she was explaining to me, I thought, yeah, that totally makes sense. And as I got into it, it just felt the most natural thing in the world. And in the beginning, we were in an open relationship, and I probably got a bit too excited and took advantage of that liberty a bit too much. So
Wait,
probably.
Can you tell us what you mean by that?
I mean that I realized that when I have a partner, I'm a lot more attractive to women. Like the success rate of dating or kind of picking up women went really high just because I was partner. And
really,
yeah,
my husband does not have that experience.
Well, I don't know what it was about it, but I imagine that I wasn't, you know, I didn't have that hunger. I wasn't like hunting. I was quite happy with what I was doing. So I think women responded to that. Like I was quite relaxed about the interaction with them.
Yeah, because that desire energy can be really pushy. Sometimes you're totally right, because you have that I don't need anything, which makes you very approachable. Agreed.
However, I think that I overdid it. I was just like so excited about that. I mean, I've never really been somebody who just serially dates like all the time. You know, I was usually in long-term monogamous relationships and quite kind of serious committed ones. So for me, that was a whole new world that opened up to kind of casual flirtations and hookups and stuff like that. Now, at some point, after a few months, my girlfriend was kind of getting a bit fed up with just hearing all my stories and felt that I wasn't really paying her enough attention. And I have to admit that I think she was kind of right. You know, I was also traveling a lot and working a lot abroad, which was fun for me, but not so much for her. So at some point, we, you know, about a year, we stopped dating, stopped being in a relationship romantically, but we stayed friends. And also, during that time, I met her other partner, my metamor, and we became good friends, and we're still friends until today. So that was also a nice benefit of dating her, that I got a friend out of that.
I love that. So there's a lot about the beginning of your journey that is very common, right? We're in this kind of like monogamous relationship, long-term, where the sex has died or dampened or the spark is gone. And this is the stuff that so many polyam people warn against, where we're like, don't open your relationship to save the relationship. And of course, in your case, it did. Also, don't ask, don't tell. Terrible idea. Never works. The only way to learn that, to fucking do it. And so, you know, your path is so many of the things that we as polyamory educators and you know, maybe shepherds in this space warn against, and yet it worked out for you because it got you here. How do you like reconcile that to somebody who may be listening to you and resonating to a lot of the place you were in?
Well, I have to admit that when I did that first year, I didn't really know what I was doing. I just fell into it, and I was enjoying it, and and I was with somebody I really liked, you know, so I kept going. Now, after we broke up, I really started being a bit more conscious about what does it actually mean to be in multiple relationships. Because again, that experience was being in a relationship and then being open, so dating casually. I think that I was open to something more happening, but that wasn't really the agreements we had. I think that it wasn't totally explicit, but the implication was that we were like the main item, you know, the primaries.
Totally.
And since then, I've become a lot more conscious of what kind of dynamic I really want. Not just falling into things and rolling with it, but actually being intentional in the dynamic that works for me. It took me several years and some really difficult experiences, even traumatic, to get to the point of realizing exactly what I want and having good boundaries to be able to actually realize it.
And do you feel like that is the nature of the path, especially because we are coming out of compulsory monogamy? So like maybe in a utopia where multiple relationship styles are presented to us and healthy versions of monogamy and non-monogamy are presented, like it wouldn't have to be that way. But do you think that that is just the nature of this walk? Like it's impossible to read non-monogamy theory and then start it and just get it right? Like so much of it is learning through pain, learning your boundaries by having them crossed, growing out of wounds, healing your trauma, healing your attachment styles. Like, do you just feel like that's what it is?
I don't want to believe that. I mean, it was like that for me. I guess it was like that for you. I think that if you've been monogamous for a long time, for decades, then that's almost inevitable. If you haven't took the time and had the awareness to deal with your trauma and your wounds before that process started, before you started on that journey. The thing is that it's really only the opening up and the introduction to polyamory that puts you face to face with all your trauma, right?
Yep. That's the first thing that happens.
So you realize you have to actually take care of that, and because you can be quite oblivious in monogamy and just ignore it and keep going without thinking about it. Now, I do take heart from people that are, say, in their 20s now that do begin their relationship journey knowing that there's a whole spectrum that they can have access to, that they can choose whatever works for them. It's no longer that monogamy, I mean, at least from the people that I see around me in their 20s, they have a much more expansive perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I wish that when I was starting, I would have found somebody who could give me some guidance. And one of the reasons I'm doing what I'm doing is to help people avoid a lot of the pain. I don't think it's inevitable. I think that if you only rely on theory, that's not enough.
Yeah, no.
So I think that some kind of guidance, support, whether it's peer support, whether it's coaching, whether it's therapy with somebody, a therapist that's actually poly affirming and poly knowledgeable, then that can take care of a lot of those obstacles and make it less traumatic as an experience. Yes.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I always really encourage, you mentioned like the young 20-somethings and the way that they're doing non-monogamy. I always tell older folks, like elder millennials and beyond, like be inspired by the way that Gen Z is doing non-monogamy and the ease and effortlessness or relatively compared of their path compared to ours. But like, also honor the fact that the longer you spent inside compulsory monogamy, the harder it is to make the change. And so like be inspired by Gen Z, but don't try to compare the paths because the walks are totally different.
For sure. Yeah.
What do you feel like as a cis man who mostly dates femmes, what do you feel like has been the hardest, most important things that you have had to learn to become a healthy polyamorous person?
I've had to, I guess the hardest thing, if I want to kind of narrow down to one thing, is that I needed to really expand my ability to have empathy. And beyond a pretty narrow scope that a lot of cis men grow up with, and a lot of it is observing the experiences that my female friends have and partners over the years and seeing what they're dealing with in terms of harassment, in terms of, just like sexism, in terms of like the experiences they have in clubs from men. Like, I think that just by having more relationships, I get a lot more perspectives from the female side,
Yeah.
And that is, if I'm willing to learn from that, I will learn from that, and I will develop more empathy. And that's
there's a trend here. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you. There's a trend when I did my Polyamorous Men series interview with Chad from PolyamFam. That was his answer too, is he was like, I had to start really listening to women and learning about their experiences. And so like, there's a trend here, but keep going.
Well, I feel that I've had a good start in life since I grew up with my mother and two sisters. And I had a lot of, I had outsized respect to what women are going through and maybe not so much respect for the masculine part of me as well. So another thing that I learned, and I learned thanks to polyamory, is to really own and love my masculine part and not be ashamed of it.
God, beautiful. Let's go down that rabbit hole, my friend. So it's like learning to heal away from the toxic masculinity and lean into the sacred masculinity. What does that look like? Paint a picture for me, baby.
Well, so I've always had the view of masculinity as something toxic, and therefore I shied away from it. And that would mean also not really expressing my own masculine side, you know. And the process of allowing for polyamory, so allowing for that openness and expansiveness, allowing for like the total realization that I don't control anybody else, I don't have possession of another person. Right? That nobody owes me anything. That my partners never owe me anything. You know, that just because I'm a man doesn't give me any special rights. And that goes against what I've been taught as, you know, growing up, that somehow being a man is a special privilege, you know. And I still live in a world where men get special privilege. And I need to intentionally combat that. You know, and remember that that doesn't give me specifically any extra rights. So moving away from the toxicity and discovering, I had to just discover totally from scratch what is masculinity to me. And part of it was going deep into the primal kind of masculine and realizing that I can be both strong and manly and take space and still be empathetic and still be gentle and still be vulnerable. And that's not something I was taught anywhere, right? So I had to just essentially figure it out and come to that realization. And that took therapy. It took a lot of conversations with friends. It took also, as I mentioned, I think a very, I was in a pretty toxic relationship for 3 years. That was polyamorous, but still toxic. And that was a level of trauma that I definitely would not wish on anybody, and I would hope that my work, if it can help people avoid that, then I will be very happy. So I don't know how much I want to talk about it in detail here, but I'll definitely say that just being in a polyamorous relationship doesn't mean, and just because you both want polyamory, doesn't mean that it will work. Doesn't mean that you will actually have you share the same values of how to practice it. There's so many ways to practice it. If you don't touch base and don't actually coordinate and communicate what those values are and whether they are compatible, then it can blow up in your face.
Yeah. That's such a great point, because I think so often when you are in a marginalized or minority identity, a lot of times there's this, okay, well, we have that identity in common. We're both polyamorous, so this should work. But what we find is not only is there more styles to polyamory that might not be compatible, but just you as humans might not be compatible. But I imagine the journey right now is a lot easier than it's ever been because of the internet and the ability to meet other polyamorous folks. But yeah, it can be really hard. And so much of what I do in the peer support world and within polyamory is helping people have those moments where we're really looking at compatibility and is this in true alignment? Is it serving people? And like you said, you know, polyamory is the thing that was the catalyst to you moving into a healthier version of yourself. So like polyamory caused it, but it also made you a better polyamorous person. So there was like a nice feedback loop there.
It's a very nice kind of virtuous cycle, for sure, like a virtuous circle where the more comfortable I get with myself, the better I can actually communicate what are my needs. I'm going to also attract people who respect that, who respect my boundaries, so can show me their boundaries and show me their authentic self. So it works in tandem, and then the more I get to know them and what their needs are, and it helps me then, I guess, kind of fine-tune the empathy. So, and the other thing I would say, which is a benefit of polyamory, is every relationship is going to be very different. and you learn to communicate the way that that relationship requires, right? So you also became kind of a better communicator.
Yes, amen.
That's at least the ideal. And it's all about intention. Like it's still work. And the flip side of what I think people don't necessarily always say is that polyamory also is a lot of work and is constant communication. Yeah.
I think, you know, I have a lot of monogamous friends who are genuine allies, and they will say, following your page has made me so sure I'm monogamous simply because, not because I'm too jealous or whatever, but simply because I just don't have the energy it takes to navigate multiple relationships. And I think ultimately that is the thing that makes me polyamorous, is not that I have the energy, but that it's a priority, that it is so much work, but the investment has a payoff for me that fills my cup. And so polyamory fills my cup, and for other people it drains their cup, and that's not for them. And I think that's, you know, with all judgment removed, that's really what it comes down to. Tell me about your journey to realizing that you are solo polyamorous, because that is even more niche within the polyamorous community, and I love to hear people's journeys to that place.
Yeah, so that's also something that came about as I just experienced different types of polyamory. I mentioned I was in an open relationship, and then I was in a nesting relationship for 3.5 years, where we started off as essentially kind of play partners, and over time got closer and closer, and over time the other relationships that we were in fell away, and we found ourselves through more like convenience and practicality living together and becoming de facto primaries. The thing about that relationship was that we never clearly sat down and said, hey, we are primary, you know, partners. So I think I in my heart was always solo polyamorous. I didn't know that word before, and I didn't know how to express that. But I didn't want to prioritize a specific relationship over another, formally through structures. You know, I'm aware that relationships will have priorities, and those are like emotional priorities. And that's fine if it naturally happens, but prioritizing them through a symbolism of the structure is something that I was, I think, maybe not comfortable with, because I was married and I don't think that worked for me. And because monogamy didn't work for me, monogamy has so many structures. You know, so I tried to kind of move away from that. And I then ended up in another one where my partner at the time was hoping that that will work, but wanted that, again, without clearly communicating that to me. So, and the closer we got and the more entangled we got, the more dependent she was on that relationship for security and safety. And that made me stressed. So when that relationship ended, first, after living with somebody and with that relationship kind of becoming quite tumultuous at the end, I wanted my own space. So it was important to me to have my own space where I decide who goes in and out, and if I want to be alone, I can be alone. You know, so that was part of it. And then I happened to, a few months after breaking up, I happened to start dating 2 women exactly on the same time, like literally on the same day. And those relationships developed and blossomed in parallel. And the NRE got into this loop, right? Because I was having NRE or both, and that basically another kind of virtuous circle of NRE that lasted much longer than I think it would have if it was dating one person.
Wow, that's so cool. I've never had that experience.
Yeah, it was nice. And as a result of that, I also realized that I don't necessarily need to prioritize one over the other. And the fact that they knew each other and knew about each other, and it was developed in parallel, also meant that there wasn't too much to do with, you know, issues around jealousy and comparison and stuff like that. And that also worked quite well. So as a result of this experience, I figured out that solo polyamory is kind of my thing. And
it's where you thrive.
It's where I thrive, and now that I can kind of give that as a label, I guess, it means that it's easy for me to explain to potential new partners or people that are interested in my in my love life have a clear, kind of nice, encapsulated explanation of
Do
the
you know
style.
where your saturation number is? Like, what's too much for Roy?
We'll probably find out. The pandemic has put a dampener on finding out for a while. We'll see. I think that in terms of, actually, I don't know. I have my priorities are going to be things like family and work and things like that, right? So, and my existing partners. So I definitely don't want to deprioritize or end up having to how to say, I wouldn't want an existing relationship to suffer because I start a new one.
Okay.
So potentially 3 or 4 would be a max, but it kind of totally depends on the other person, how often they're really interested in meeting, how much time they have. I don't put, and I don't think that the amount of time we meet or the intervals that we meet say anything about the emotional connection.
I agree. I feel like one could really have like an infinite number of comet partners. And if you're new to this space and we're throwing out a lot of lingo, we'll have to go back and redefine solo polyamory, NRE. I always, assume people are keeping up. But comet partner is someone you love them, but you don't stay in contact. But when the comet comes into your orbit, you ride it until it leaves. It's usually for long distance relationships. So I feel like somebody could have like an infinite number of comet partners, but you're right. The question of saturation really comes down to what the other people are needing and how much time. I always say, like, my ideal scenario would be my nesting partner / baby daddy / husband, and then like one serious local partner that I can really emotionally invest in and experience the joy of love and intimacy and sex. And then like 1 or 2 seasonal like play dates. Like that would be my ideal thing. But I have young kids, and that really affects my ability to, if I was, childless polyamorous person, I would probably have a lot of partners. I can tell you that right now. Are you a parent?
I am, but my child is a teenager, so it's not really an issue in terms of time management.
So you're telling me that I have a future that is freer? Is that what
You
you're
have,
telling me?
yes, I'm telling you that the future is bright.
Oh, God, I needed to hear that. Tell me about being, are you open? I'm sure you are because you're on the internet, like with your teenager. Tell me what that relationship is like as a polyamorous parent of a teenager. I would love to talk about that.
Well, there's not much to say because I think teenagers are not that interested in their parents' love life anyway. It's very different.
But are you open with them?
Yeah. I think I told them about maybe polyamorous when they were 13, and so they've known since about that time. They kind of think it's a little bit weird, and they're not necessarily something for them, but they're also very much on the belief that whatever makes me happy, like they're fine with.
Right.
So it's pretty simple.
So back to the.
Yeah,
go ahead. No, you go.
No, I was just mentioning that at their age group, there's people who are non-binary and gender fluid and polyamorous. It's a very different world from how I grew up. So a lot of that is totally normalized. Yeah.
Literally, although I'm still waiting to see it in the cultural semiology, in the Dawson's Creek, it's an American show, but like the teenage soap operas, I'm still waiting to see it well represented in those spaces because I'm seeing it in the population, but I'm not seeing it in their culture, and that's when I'll know things are really changing.
Well, who writes those soap operas, right? 30-year-olds. So yeah.
Touche. Okay, so back to the polyamorous men angle. We've talked about the things that you have integrated and healed and have made you a healthy polyamorous person. Tell us the things that you struggle with, that you still struggle with.
You sound like my therapist.
I'm not, I promise.
I actually had a therapy session this morning, and that's what she asked me.
Oh, interesting. Well, and Oh, somebody says the new Gossip Girl has hints of polyamory. See, and then I'll get annoyed because once the culture figures out that there's actually a really amazing way to represent polyamory, then they'll all do it and I'll be happy, but I'll be annoyed because it will come from like a capitalist place of it increased ratings and not from like the right place. But anyway.
So what you're saying, you're saying you'll never be happy. You'll never be satisfied.
Hey, you're the one in the hot seat here. Okay. So you don't obviously you don't have to unpack anything that you don't want to about where you're struggling, but I'm specifically asking in your polyamorous journey, like what was your last hiccup? Did you just look at your partner? That was so real. I love polyamorous people. Oh my god.
It's okay. She's on her headphones. She's in a different world, I think. Are you watching us? No. Okay. No, I didn't. I was just anyway. Last hiccup. Well, yeah, I can tell you about a little bit about what happened during the lockdown.
Oh, please.
I think that's an interesting story. So I'm in London, and we, for a while the government tried to ignore that there was a pandemic, and then all of a sudden, within like a week, they announced a serious lockdown. Everybody had to basically stay home and go out like once a day for a run. And in all that confusion, I was, concerned with my partners that we won't be able to see each other because we lived, again, that's the whole thing about sort of polyamory in this situation, that can be a serious problem. So in order to not, again, have to kind of choose one over the other, we agreed that they will both move in with me. And now I practice parallel polyamory, so they don't have any kind of connection between the two of them. They obviously know each other, but living together in a 2-bedroom flat for duration that's unknown, because we didn't know how long the lockdown would be for. We thought it was going to be 4 weeks or so. Ended up being longer than that. And that was a challenge because we didn't have enough of our own space. They each had a room, but I kind of floated, basically.
Yeah.
And we were all on our best behavior, but also really find it hard to relax and really be totally yourself. So that was a struggle. And eventually, after about 6 weeks, one moved out, and then later on another one moved out, and it works better when we are living separately and intentionally choose when we're going to see each other.
Yeah. And I love polyamorous people for our ability to break that script instead of being like, that ego wants to be like, we should be able to be around each other all the time. And I love polyamorous people for being like, I love you, but I cannot live with you. Like, I'm going to go over here. And I feel like so much of the old script, so many beautiful relationships I know of my monogamous friends ended when I actually think the karma wasn't done yet. They just shouldn't have gone on the escalator. And if a different script had been shown to them, if they had been neighbors instead of buying a house together, they might still be together to this day.
Or if somebody told them that changing the script midway as well, or like that falling off the escalator isn't failure. Just because you didn't get to the next stage or that didn't work out doesn't mean that everything is a failure.
Yes.
I think people are so expecting that trajectory that if the next step doesn't happen, then we have to break everything, right? And that's
like you can't downshift, and that's not true. You can you might be a little salty about it. I know sometimes my ego is like, for example, well, I don't want to live together, but I'm salty that you don't want to live together. Something like that. And it's just, you have to laugh at yourself in those moments and recognize, like, no, what is the nature of the commitment here? And allow the tuning fork to tune to the key of that relationship. And this this relationship is in C#, but I'll tell you, my marriage is E flat. And, that's just how it is. And so some things aren't going to be in resonance. And I think that's where parallel polyamory really is healthy, of like, if you've got two dissonant chords, to keep going on this metaphor, like, but they're still great, they still fit in my key, but I'm going to keep them separate over here.
I like so the relationship escalator is something that I think people are largely familiar with now. Hopefully our listeners are. Going with that metaphor, in my course kind of education work, I often give a different metaphor of the jungle gym. You familiar with the jungle gym? Is it the same thing in America?
Yes,
I don't know.
yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah. The idea is that you can climb and slide down and move there and jump off and just do, whatever you want within the space. It doesn't have to be a linear progression.
Wow, I
So,
love that.
mm.
It's
and
like the smorgasbord.
um, yeah, it's like the smorgasbord, and it's something and you create your own path, and that doesn't have to look like anybody else. That's something very important. It's very convenient for people who come out of monogamy to look for another kind of prescriptive kind of path that's laid out, like monogamy was. And I think that often people come and say, okay, I'm not, monogamy isn't for me, so what else should I do? Like, how should I be doing polyamory? And my hope is that the real question is, who am I? What are my real needs? What are my values? What are my boundaries? And then from here, okay, how do I structure something that will make me fulfilled and happy? And it doesn't have to look like, accepting that it may not look like anybody else's relationship dynamic. Okay.
Yeah, and recognizing too, and I think we see this in political structures too, like where in societies where we've, dismantled hierarchy, successfully, in 10 years, all of a sudden, slowly, this weird hierarchy built. We didn't even know how it happened. And so you're like, wait, how did that happen? I think the same thing can happen. And it's like, how did we go from, socialism to fascism? Like, it just snuck up on us. I thought we dismantled this, but like, it's what they're finding is it's in human nature to dismantle power, and then slowly the ego wants to take it back. And so we kind of constantly have to be re-examining where are we at on the jungle gym and giving ourselves permission to redefine it without the ego's hit of like, like going back to the jungle gym metaphor, which I love. Like, let's say in my marriage, originally, we used to play all over the jungle gym. And now I'm really like, I just want to hang on the monkey bars with you. I'm going to go on the slide with that person over there and on the rock wall with that person over there. And it can be really difficult if somebody comes in and I'm all over the jungle gym with that person, but I used to be all over the jungle gym with my husband, but now he's just on the monkey bars. Like, and sometimes you just have to feel that. You have to feel that we've downshifted or this has shifted, but not let it be hierarchical in your mind. Just because I'm all over the jungle gym with this other person doesn't mean anything. But if you feel a certain way about it, we do have to look at that. Like, if that's not working for you, then you have to make sure you're self-advocating. But perhaps it's only not working for you because you are believing a lie about it.
Well, oftentimes the reason you feel it's not working is because you expected it to be something else. Like, you got into the relationship believing that this is what we have now is what will always be. Right?
Yes, thank you. There it is. Yeah. And if it does change, it's gone further up the escalator.
Yeah, it changes in one direction.
It's either going to stay here forever or go up, and not like, and I think part of what we are doing with Remodeled Love, and I really kind of hinted my first piece of content about it yesterday. I think that slowly my husband and I are going to start getting a little more raw about where we are at in our journey, but we are dismantling our hierarchy. And I truly think that we are at a place where most people would probably get divorced right now. But we are so in love. There's no reason for us to divorce. We just have to look at where we're at on the jungle gym. And if we can find the place we are now, I think is so beautiful. And I wish the script existed. And I do feel that part of my path on this earth is to create the script, because it doesn't exist. And so I think part of the calling of the day lovers is to let you know, like, hey, this is how we're doing marriage over here. And it's very triggering for people because my husband is not my biggest play partner. And I think inside marriages, especially polyamorous marriages that came from monogamy, so a couple that was married inside monogamy and then made the leap to polyamory together, it can be really terrifying to recognize that your partner's best sexual experiences might be with other people.
Hey, I think that the kind of openness to change is crucial for people to actually stay together. Wouldn't it be lovely if the marriage vows included a whole statement about how change is inevitable and like we embrace change. We want each other to also change the way that feels authentic to us, and I will, you know, as the spouse, I will support you in that.
Mm-hmm.
And and just like embracing change as part of development, part of growth, not resisting it, just to
That's
keep
beautiful.
myself safe in what I used to know. Right? Where
Yeah,
so much is driven by, and that's we lose so much because of that.
That's so true, driven by fear. I feel like my partner and I, we always say if we're together when we're 80, it's really more of a coincidence that our souls remained in alignment and in resonance for that long, rather than a vow that we took, because we always say our vow is to ourselves, to be true to ourselves and to lead a life like we are responsible for our happiness in this lifetime, and we are responsible for advocating for that happiness. Now, granted, there's a lot of privilege and nuance in that journey, and I really want to toss that out there, that of course, the more marginalized you are, the harder it will be for you to claim your happiness in this lifetime. So that aside, within my marriage, it's like my vow is to be true to myself and honest with my partner about who I am. And over time, that has made me a lot gayer than I was in the beginning, and at least that's the flavor we're at now. And I think part of this Polyamorous Men series, to tie it back around, is like you said, the entitlement that men are raised with to feel. It can be really hard for especially cis straight men in marriages to watch their partner's journey away from them. Yeah. So do you want to take questions for a second?
I can't see the questions, but if you read them out to me, happy to take them, yes.
Sure. So if you have any questions right now, feel free to get them in, and we will stay on for I have another 10 minutes that we can go answering questions. But I would love to hear about, while the questions are coming in, you're offering peer support right now. You're a therapist in training. What's your end goal?
So I'm offering relationship coaching and mentorship. So basically working with people who often are somewhere along the non-monogamous journey, although I also very happy to work with monogamous people, and I also do kind of couples coaching. So I do feel that monogamous people can learn so much from the skills that people in polyamory developed, and I also feel that for people who know that they're monogamous, then there's a lot of communication skills that they can develop, but many people are monogamous by default and have never actually seriously questioned why they are monogamous. And that can be a great exercise and the thought experiment to go through, why am I monogamous? What is actually causing me to stay, to want exclusivity? And we mentioned before that when you start kind of on the polyamorous journey, you are hit with all those traumas and wounds that all of a sudden kind of come up, right? And you need to kind of deal with them. That experiment, that kind of thought experiment and that exercise will hopefully kind of, for monogamous people, can highlight those issues that, put a spotlight on them, and that they can realize that it's something they maybe want to take into therapy. So as a coach, I can help people kind of come up with strategies and maybe bring some things to the fore. And if it's something that does require more expert kind of therapy, I will direct them to a poly-aware and poly-affirming therapist if they're non-monogamous, or in any case, someone who can help them. I'm a therapist in training right now, so I will also start offering therapy next year. And my ultimate goal is to be a psychotherapist, as well as continue with coaching.
What do you feel like your forte is? Like, who is the best type of person to work with you?
I think anybody who is ready to challenge their perception and challenge the kind of mononormative world that we grew up in. So it can be really anybody, and I love that now with online kind of access on video, people can come to me from anywhere in the world, and I've worked with people from the Philippines, Singapore, New Zealand, Brazil, even Kazakhstan. So it's yeah, it's really lovely too. And I think that it's important to be able to offer it in areas where there isn't local access. A lot of places are very too small, and people might feel that they're really alone and nobody can understand their journey, right? So that's really important. I would love to work more with men. Most of my clients are women identified, and I think that it's a general thing with asking for help maybe for a lot of men.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. That's why I started the Polyamorous Men series, literally, because we don't see it enough, and men are conditioned and raised to not ask for help. And so just hearing polyamorous men speak so vulnerably, I think is so powerful. And, I think that if you are a man working with a fellow polyamorous man, and I would encourage people to work with several different polyamorous coaches, because each person's experience, like as a man sitting down with a female femme polyamorous coach, might give you perspective that working with another man might only, concrete or something like that. So you should be working with people who share your identities, as well as people who don't, especially if you are of a privileged identity, making sure you're working with people with less privileges in order to open your perspective.
Yeah, I agree to that. And I find that also, when women come to me, sometimes they want to understand the male perspective, the man's perspective on relationships. So that's also important the other way. And I also like to work with people who are neurodivergent, people on the spectrum, ADHD, etc. I really enjoy that kind of work. Go really deep, and it's and oftentimes you get I also learn from every experience of working with a client. And people who are neurodivergent also bring a lot of very different perspectives that are super interesting.
Yes, agreed. And you are doing a phenomenal job. I'm loving our marriage on our Discord. So on the Remodeled Love Discord, you are modding the Polyamorous Men's channel, and you're showing up in a lot of the other channels as well. You've been a great voice in that space. So thank you so much. So if you are listening to this, Remodeled Love has a Discord with a lot of amazing stuff going on, and you can find us both in that space, specifically Roy on the Polyamorous Men's channel and on the Seeking Advice channel. I've seen you a lot in there as well. So we have a question coming in. My question is, how do you know when you are just navigating boundaries in a polyamory relationship versus ignoring them? That's a tough question. I'm going to ask that person if they can be a little more specific and give us an example. But until then, because I know there's a lag, it sounds like from what I get from that question is you set up this boundary, it's awkward, there's a lot of confusion, somebody breaks the boundary, you accuse them of ignoring the boundary, and they're like, no, I'm just trying to navigate the boundary, I didn't mean to break it. That's what I take from the question.
I tend to agree with you. It sounds like that would be the intention, I think. And my answer is a very short one, is trust.
My answer is clear and specific. So when I'm working with clients, it's one of the biggest things I've noticed in communication and communication problems. At the root of communication problems and at the root of boundary problems is a lack of clear and specific details. People feel awkward giving clear and specific details. We're also conditioned in a codependent world in which we're like, you should know what I meant. So a lot of times, like, let's say the boundary is I want to be respected. Right? And then that is not clear and specific. Okay, you might think that's clear and specific, and then your partner's like, great, okay, you want to be respected. And then the next thing they know, they do something, they're texting their other partner in bed, they're on their phone with their other partner while you're in bed together at night, and you're like, I feel disrespected, my boundary has been crossed. And it's like, that was not clear and specific.
Yeah, I can resonate with that,
Yeah.
Like, all of my experience in the past, was around that lack of specificity, and then being accused of breaking boundaries where it wasn't really clear enough. Right? So I've experienced that. Yeah. So I think like specificity, accuracy is part of how you get to trust. I mean, I was flippant with like the short answer, but essentially is the things you need to build that trust are clear and specific boundaries.
Yes.
Is constantly checking in, right? Not just assuming that your partner understands it, not just assuming that you understand them, but
there you go.
Reconfirming. and being, also being willing to talk about the difficult things, not to shy away. Like
Yeah.
I have like my own mantra where if there's something I feel awkward and a little bit afraid to tell my partner about, it's the one thing I have to tell them about.
There you go. I love that. Yeah, learning to have difficult conversations. And if you're a people pleaser at all, learning self-advocacy within boundary work and learning to not feel guilty about having a boundary and learning to say, I would appreciate it if you did not text your other partner while we're in bed together. It's a request. We all get to make requests. And that's what this walk is. Okay, so we need to wrap it up. I want to plug our Discord. The link in my bio is probably expired, so give me a few minutes when I get off this interview. I'll go refresh. Join our Discord. There's 700 people in there right now. Somebody said, oh, I have ADHD in the chat. We have an ADHD and polyamory channel on our Discord. Polyamorous Men. We've got polyamorous parents, kinky polyamory. If you feel like there's a need for a room that we don't have yet, you can let us know. And your website, OpenRelating.com?
No, OpenRelating.love.
.love. OpenRelating.love. I love that. Roy, thank you for being who you are, showing up in this space, the internet space, but also the space today. And thank you for sharing your wisdom with the world.
My pleasure. It's been really fun catching up with you.
Thanks, Roy. All right, I'm going to end here on Instagram. Thank you guys so much for watching.